Dumfries in Scotland, from the School of Interdisciplinary Studies, University of Glasgow. The University of Glasgow, through its School of Interdisciplinary Studies, is delighted to present a global water webinar series. And this series will provide a platform for discussion on current and future water-related problems and potential solutions from multidisciplinary, multi-sectoral, and multi-issues perspectives. This third webinar will be on the topic of water justice. Even as we approach the second quarter of the 21st century, at least half of the global population either do not have water which is clean, safe to drink, or it is perceived to be unsafe. In our webinar today, we will discuss water justice on a global basis, on a local basis, and what can be done about it. We will first start with Professor Fabrice Renaud. He is head of the School of Interdisciplinary Studies and professor of environmental risk and community resilience. Fabrice, please, if you could give your remarks.
Thank you very much, Cecilia, for the introduction. And I would like to welcome everyone to this webinar, and good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, wherever you are. I just have a few slides for introducing this webinar, and then this will be followed by the panelists. So first of all, what you can see here on the left is the fact that there has been an increase in the percentage of people accessing safely managed drinking water services and also basic drinking water services between 2000, the left-hand bar, and 2020. So there has been significant progress over these 2 decades, but this still means that 1 in 4 people still do not have access to safely managed drinking water services as we speak now. So this equates to about 2 billion people globally. There is also inequity because about 8 out of 10 people who still lack access to safely managed drinking water services live in rural areas, and about half of them live in least developed countries. So we are now 5 years plus in the SDGs, and we're basically struggling to meet one of the specific targets, which is target 6.1, which says that by 2030, we need to achieve universal and equitable access to safe and affordable drinking water for all. And basically, if we continue at the current rate, we will only have 81% coverage by 2030, meaning that 1.6 billion people will be without safely managed services. And of course, as is often the case, the poor and vulnerable populations are more at risk of being left behind. And you can see this also on the map, which shows the proportion of population using safely managed drinking water services, which varies greatly around the world. So I've talked a little bit about target 6.1, which belongs to Sustainability Development Goal number 6, which focuses on water. And you can see the figure of 1.6 billion people on this pictogram here. But it's also the fact that there are many people who are accessing water without exactly knowing the quality of that water. And this is hugely problematic also. On the right-hand side, you have Sustainable Development Goal 1, which is linked to ending poverty. And there has been major setbacks in achieving this goal because of the COVID-19 pandemic and some geopolitical contexts that are materializing in the recent couple of years. By and large, generally speaking, though, it is recognized that water underpins most of the Sustainable Development Goals, but particularly those related to poverty reduction, economic growth, and environmental sustainability. Now, water scarcity is predominant in many regions of the world, and water scarcity is not the only factor that explains access to safely managed drinking water services, but it's an important component. And you can see on this figure taken from the IPCC latest report the number of months per year where severe water scarcity happens. And if you exclude desertic areas, there's still significant amount of people who live under conditions of severe water scarcity for at least 1 month per year. And it's estimated that this is 4 billion people. And you can see the geographical spread here with mainly Southern Africa, some parts of South Asia, Southeast Asia, and East Asia, and also Northern America and parts of Southern Europe that are particularly affected by this. Now, water scarcity is only one element among many others that explain the difficulties people around the world have to access safely managed drinking water. And if you look at a global water security index, also from the IPCC report, you can see that water scarcity is one of 3 indicators under the relative water availability criteria that is shown on the bottom right map of this figure. And this is only one component of global water security, because global water security is also linked to the relative effectiveness of water management, the relative accessibility to water services, and the relative water quality and safety of the water. And all these combine to provide the information about the global water security. And you can see that even if relative water availability is reasonable in many parts of the world, when you factor in the other components, the water security index becomes lower in some regions, in particular in sub-Saharan Africa, and again, South Asia, Southeast Asia, East Asia, among others. In the longer term, we're going also to see the effects of global warming on precipitation, which is one of the elements that will also determine water scarcity globally. On this map, you can see regions where changes in precipitation per each 1 degree Celsius of global warming will change either negatively, so that's the redder colors, or positively in the wetter colors. And again, some of the same regions I have mentioned before are likely to be affected with less or reductions in precipitations, which may aggravate the accessibility to water resources in the long run. And my last slide for this introduction is also to frame all this in human rights and justice, since the webinar is about water justice. And we need to remember that the United General Assembly passed a resolution in 2010 that recognizes the right to safe and clean drinking water and sanitation as a human right that is essential for the full enjoyment of life and all human rights. And finally, about the thematic of water justice that the panelists are going to elaborate upon, it is a concept that is addressing principles of fairness, equity, participation, and justice related to global and local water crisis. It considers many dimensions, not only the water resources itself, but the socio-economic, technical, hydrological, cultural, juridical, and political aspects of water. And it goes well beyond the questions of distribution, and it also factors in the sustainability of our ecosystems. So this is just a brief introduction that I wanted to give to hopefully set the scene. I thank you for your attention. I pass you back to Cecilia.
Thank you, Fabrice. Thank you very much for this excellent introduction, which shows that water availability, water access goes much more beyond the physical availability of water, and it depends on the management, on the governance, on the policy aspects. Thank you very much again. So we have today for our webinar 3 very eminent panelists: Professor Quentin Grafton, Professor Anne Perlina, and Professor Asit Biswas. Each one of them have a long career of achievements. And I would like to first introduce Professor Quentin Grafton for his introduction. Professor Quentin Grafton, he is Professor of Economics, Australian Laureate Fellow, convener of the Water Justice Hub, and Director of the Centre for Water Economics, Environment and Policy at the very well-known Crawford School of Public Policy at Australian National University. In April 2020, Professor Quentin Grafton was appointed as the chairholder, the UNESCO chair in water economics and transboundary water governance. And between August 2013 and July 2014, he served as executive director at the Australian National Institute of Public Policy. Currently, he serves as the director of the Food, Energy, Environment, and Water Network. Quentin, if you could please share with us your thoughts for the next 10 minutes.
Thanks so much, Cecilia, and thank you, Asit, and thank you, Fabrice, for actually laying out a very clear outline of what's happening in the world of water and relating it to SDG 6. So I've got to, first of all, make an acknowledgement to country. I'm on Ngunnawal Ngambri country, which is in Canberra, Australian Capital Territory, Australia, and I pay my respects to their elders, past and present. So let me just go on and now talk through this issue of the so-called Great Acceleration, which is not due to me. It's due to a series of authors, headlined by Will Steffen, and what I'm calling the Great Consideration. Perhaps not the best term, but to try and angle what's going on in water from what's happened, what is happening, and put a values focus around it, which of course is very much connected to water justice. So let me just go on and first of all highlight to you that there are a number of people associated with the Water Justice Hub, and you'll be very fortunate to be able to listen to Dr. Anne Polina in the next few minutes, along with many others who are the Water Justice Hub but won't be able to join us this evening, at least in terms of presentations. So I'm very grateful for them. Whatever we do in the Water Justice Hub is very much a team effort, working in true partnership with communities and working collectively to achieve water justice. And we call it water justice for all in the context of our key mission. So you don't need me to tell you this, but it is worth highlighting in 2022, just in the last few months, we of course had the massive Pakistan floods. It's affected upwards of 10 to 20 million, possibly more, possibly 30 million, but certainly a good portion of Pakistan. You have the heat waves and droughts focusing on northern China, and of course Western Europe and Central Europe had a whole series of droughts in the past Northern Hemisphere summer. And so I've just put in some words here from Nobel laureate Bob Dylan, and of course well-known composer and singer. In the context, times really they are changing, and they're changing because of climate change. But it's not a climate change issue per se. It's connected to biodiversity. It's connected to water. It's connected to a whole series of what I would call and what people would call systemic risks. So let me go on and again reiterate the Sustainable Development Goals supposed to be achieved by 2030. I'm just highlighting three of the key action targets in relation to SDG 6, which is water. And I'm just highlighting what Fabrice said is that we are not going to achieve those goals by 2030, and some of them we're not even going to get close to it. So something's wrong. We are off track. 2022 has certainly highlighted that for us, if we didn't already know it. And so we've got to do things differently. And the difference, what we need to do in terms of change is that a misused term, I think, almost a cliche, it's transformative or transformational change. It's not incremental, although incremental is the way to start, I suppose. And water security, as was highlighted as the index that Fabrice mentioned, but it combines multiple dimensions: drinking water, of course, and human well-being, ecosystems, the issue of green infrastructure, and then, of course, all the hazards and risks, because when climate change hits, it's very much water related, whether it's a cyclone hitting Florida, or whether it's floods in Pakistan, or droughts in China, or wherever it might be. And heat stress as well is fed through water in terms of affecting crops. And of course, it affects people and affects economies. So it's a multidimensional beast, and we have to work in multiple dimensions, and we have to work in a way that's bespoke to the context and bespoke to the problems and the challenges, and tailored, of course, to the communities that are suffering from water injustice and for what's happening in the world's water crisis. So this is just from the latest version of it, The Great Acceleration by Will Stephan and several co-authors, just highlighting what's happened since 1750, very, very large increases in GDP in terms of per capita income. As well, large increases in population. We're running around 8 billion right now. We may peak at 10.5 or may peak a little less or maybe a little more. And then you see global water use. So this so-called Great Acceleration is all about economic activity and taking off, of course, in industrial times, at least where the countries first industrialized, but particularly so since post-World War II. So the Great Acceleration is often referred to as post-1950. So lots of good things have happened in the sense that people have been taken out of poverty. Billions, in fact, have. But nevertheless, there have been a whole series of downsides and costs, including in terms of nature and including marginalized and vulnerable communities. And of course, here's a picture, a world global picture, just highlighting in red those river systems that we have lack of conductivity and large levels of over extraction, and they're all over the world, okay, with some exceptions. And so that surface water, of course, there's flows. It's also existing in terms of groundwater. And those are the consequences. And it's, of course, the poor and the vulnerable that are most exposed to those sorts of situations. They don't have the ability to access the services that wealthier people have. And this is the so-called great inequality, at least in terms of income inequality. And you can see a whole series of countries. Not all countries in the world are listed here, but a lot of them are. And you can see that on the upper side here, this is where I'm pointing. My pointer is there's been increased income equality since 1990. There has been some movements in the right direction, particularly in a series of African countries. Although I have to say that they still remain extremely unequal in terms of their income. So great acceleration, yes, a lot of benefits, but also there hasn't been a lot of change, as you can see here, at least in a global sense, in income inequality, unless, of course, we include some specific countries, China and India in particular, where there has been improvements. But if you look here for China, improvements in per capita income, but not improvements in income inequality. So big improvements in per capita income, but not in the context of inequality. So where does this take us? Well, there's many directions it should take us, and I just want to highlight 7 key questions that came out in with my co-authors in a special issue in the journal that Cecilia edits as editor-in-chief. And so these are just the obvious questions to ask when we start to talk about actions in the water space. It's not just technical solutions, as Fabrice said, and as Cecilia emphasized. So for whom? So what are we talking about? Who are we talking about? Is it for whom? To what? Is it access, availability, water quality? Those sorts of key questions. You think that everyone would be able to ask and make those questions, but not all those questions are in fact asked, and many times they're not. Where? What scale? The when? The why? The why also understands the fact that we do have economists call it rent-seeking behavior, and also regulatory capture. Vested interests do not want change, typically in the water space. Certainly if you're talking about water reallocation, they most certainly don't want it. So you have to understand that. And then the how, what are the key drivers? In my country, Australia, there's a whole series of drivers from colonial times, dispossession of the land, dispossession of the water from Indigenous Australians. So that's an historical fact. So we have to understand that to be able to respond to water injustice. But that's true in other countries as well. Other dimensions, it's not the same, of course. And then ultimately, this is not about talk, it's about action. What actions are required? How are we going to do them? And that's the only way we can move forward with change. And ultimately, it must be transformational change. So thank you for the opportunity to give my introduction.
You put things precisely as they are. Times have changed. The big development movements, the big environmental movements focus, they always mention people. People are at the center. Our initiatives are to end poverty, to reduce poverty, but then our decisions are taken in such a way that this is not necessarily the case. And I like very much your questions. Shouldn't we be asking each one of these questions from the policy side? And we will come back to this. But I would appreciate if, while we go to the other presentations, if you can start thinking on my first question that refers to the new Commission on Water of which you are part and has created so much expectations. So there is this new global commission on the economics of water. It has been established and it is led by a very distinguished team of practitioners and academics. You are one of them. So when we come back to you, can you explain to us what the aim of this commission is? How is it planning to go beyond traditional economic thinking and economics? And what contributions in practice is it aiming to make in terms of water justice, please?
Those are all good questions. So there's 17 commissioners.
I'm sorry, but this will be after the presentations, then I will come back to you. Thank you very much, Quentin. So now let's see if Professor Anne Polina, she was having some problems to connect. So let's see if she's there. If not, we will go ahead with Professor Biswas. It seems there are some problems to connect, so we will go now talk with Professor Biswas, so he will make his introductory remarks, and then we will come back to Professor Anne Polina. So Professor Biswas, he has led and been part of every major initiative in the world in terms of water. He's a distinguished visiting professor at the University of Glasgow, one of the world's leading authorities on water, food, environment, all of this within the framework of overall development. He has a very distinguished career as an academic and holds 7 honorary doctorates, one of them from the University of Glasgow. Now, he has been advisors to presidents, prime ministers, and ministers in 23 countries, 6 heads of United Nations agencies, 2 secretary generals of OECD. He's a Stockholm Water Prize laureate, and his work has been translated into 42 languages. If you could please make your introductory remarks.
Thank you, Cecilia, for that kind introduction. I would focus primarily on access to water and wastewater management, both in developed and developing countries. When you speak of sustainable development goals, most people throughout the world consider that this is for developing countries only. But in reality, it is for the whole world. And we have the same problem, though magnitude is less in developed countries as in developing countries. Consider United States, one of the most powerful and economically advanced country of the world. As of now, at least 2 million people do not have access to clean water or indoor connections and indoor plumbing. And the injustice that we're talking about, which Quentin mentioned, becomes even more obvious when you consider the fact that for every white American that does not have access to indoor water supply or indoor plumbing, 19 indigenous people do not have the same, and 2 Hispanics and 2 Asians have the same. So there is an inequity also in terms of race and color in the most powerful country in the world. And one of the reasons I was excited about what Quentin is doing about his water justice is to see how the indigenous people have better access to water and wastewater treatment. All over the world, indigenous people have been suffering for decades and decades about lack of water supply and wastewater treatment. Quentin mentioned a little bit about Australia, but not only Australia, Brazil, Canada, United States, India, Pakistan, you name it, Brazil, you name it, and most other countries, the indigenous people are suffering most from the access to clean water and wastewater treatment. Now, it is very true that we are not going to meet the sustainable development goals in the area of water. But I submit to you, it has not only to do with money and funding available and also technology available, but many of the cases, like in India and Mexico, they will not be able to provide clean water to their people until and unless they make some changes in their institutional structure. For example, all the major cities of India, the chief executive of water supply is an IAS officer. They're quite intelligent, but their average stay is 18 months. Same goes in Mexico. The average stay of the director of water in the Mexican states is about 18 months. And they come from a sector mostly outside water. They have no experience on running utilities. And by the time they come, they know nothing very much about water. They learn. They also know in 18 months they will be gone. And so there is no incentive. The new person comes and the cycle continues. So it is not only the money and the resource and the water available, but also the institutional structure that in many cases that does not allow us to do that. Let me share with you some of the success stories from developing and developed countries, how they're addressing water justice. Let's go to one of the least developed countries of the world, Cambodia. Most people will be surprised to hear that Phnom Penh, capital of Cambodia, the performance indicators of Phnom Penh is better than in the area for the water utilities is better than London, Paris, or Los Angeles. Now, in 1993, Phnom Penh Water Supply Authority, PPWSA, was broke, non-functional, and if anyone got 15 minutes of water supply a day, they were the most luckiest person. And the company was, for all practical purposes, broke and bankrupt. And then, for whatever reason, a remarkable person was brought in, Exxon Chan, who knew nothing about water sector, but water sector is not a rocket science. For a year, he studied water, how to do better job. He came to some conclusion, and lo and behold, by 2000, everyone in Phnom Penh was getting clean water, which is not only available to everybody, but also can be drunk straight from the tap. In fact, during my first visit in 2006 to Phnom Penh, when Hun Sen asked me to take a look at it, I was surprised to see everyone in PPWSA was drinking water that they are providing from the tap. There was not a sign of a single bottled water anywhere. They are so confident that water is good quality. From Director General to visitors were provided a glass of water from the PPWSA. Right now, Phnom Penh's water supply authorities provides water to the to everybody, the rich and the poor. And the reason I picked up Phnom Penh is the way they have made water justice available to everyone, rich and the poor. We visited the worst slum in Phnom Penh, next to the city's garbage dump. And each unit, most of the people have only one room there where they stay, live. And we asked one of the people that whether they can afford to pay for water. And the person I asked that question was a widower. Her husband died about 5 or 6 years ago. She had 3 or 4 children, and she used her livelihood was making sweets and selling it to the on the street to the public. And I asked her, because PPWSA provides her with clean water, can she afford to pay for water? Because Phnom Penh Water Supply Authority, whether you're rich or poor, you have to pay for water, but the poor get a targeted subsidy. She looked at me, and I still remember her question. And obviously, I was well dressed compared to the Phnom Penh, the slum people. And she said, "Sir, you look like an intelligent person. Why are you asking such a stupid question?" And I said, no, I just want to know, can you pay for water which you are paying now? He said, look, I am paying now 75% of what I used to pay to the private sector who used to provide water before. The quality was dreadful. My children used to get sick regularly, and when my children are sick, I have no income. And now PPWSA provides clean water to us. My children get less sick, I have a better income, and I pay only 25% of what I used to pay before because of the subsidy. Because Phnom Penh Water Supply Authority decided, rightly or wrongly, that anyone who uses 7.5 cubic meter of water per month, any household that uses that, they are poor. So they get a special subsidy if you use 7.5 cubic meter or less. You could argue with that and do fancy analysis and say a lot of people do not get, who should get subsidy are not getting, but fact is it's working remarkably well. The second example I want to share with you is Singapore, which in 1965 was a developing country. And the system they work is quite interesting. They, of course, have a very good information system, household income, number of people staying. And if you are considered poor by Singaporean with their statistics, then automatically for your water and electricity bills, you get a voucher, which can be used to pay for your water and electricity bill. So this the water authority of public utility, PUB of Water Authority of Singapore does not subsidize the people. The government itself, from the social service, provide the vouchers which the poor people can give straight to the PUB or the electricity authority to significantly reduce their water bill. But the water company or the electricity company get fully paid their commercial rate from the government. And this has been working remarkably well. And the third example I want to share with you is from India, a city called Jodhpur. What interested me every time a household in Jodhpur gets a bill, there's a detailed calculation showing that how much the city is subsidizing each people in terms of money each month for the water supply. So that is one part of the water supply. The point I want to make is provision of water is not a rocket science. SDGs, we are giving a lot of emphasis on lack of money, lack of water resources. But the fact is, we have enough water resources because most of the cities in developing countries now lose 30 to 40% of water from the system. So the real problem is not the lack of technology, lack of finance, but lot of politics involved. And my final point I would like to make is, while we are not going to meet water SDG by a mile, in terms of wastewater management, we'll probably not meet it by 100 miles. Because if I look at in India now, or most of the developing world, no more than, according to our calculation and estimate, no more than 12 to 15% of people in developing countries has access to wastewater management, that is wastewater that is collected from the house, taken to a wastewater treatment plant, then treated properly and discharged to the environment. So yes, as Fabrice correctly pointed out, we have made great progress in terms of providing water since 1981, when the first international water supply sanitation decade was started. We've made great progress since then, but progress we have not made is in terms of providing clean water which can be drunk from the tap, or as Cecilia pointed out, that which people perceive to be safe. One of the problems in developed countries, we are now finding, a country like Japan, nobody drinks water from the tap because they perceive it not to be safe. They drink it from the plastic bottle and they assume it to be safe, but in reality, Tokyo water supply has a remarkable safe water supply, but people do not perceive to be safe. But these are social sciences questions which we will have to start thinking about, how to make people think water to be safe. In Singapore, 80% of the people, 80% of the households still boil water before drinking, even though water is clean, much cleaner than bottled water, and people still boil water. In Hong Kong, nearly 99% boil water, even though water is safe. So it's not only the hardware issues, but also software issues, which have been basically neglected by the water profession. With that, Cecilia, I send it back to you.
Thank you very much for the examples, because it is examples what makes us understand how much these concepts are followed, are not followed, are implemented, what else is missing. And I have a question for you for when we start the questions and answers section, if you can think about that. You were the main scientific advisor to the Secretary General of the United Nations Water Conference in Mar del Plata in Argentina in 1977. And you helped to formulate and promote the international water supply and sanitation decade you just mentioned. When we come back to you, if you can share with us, how have you seen water justice evolving from that time? Yes, true, the concept was not coined, it didn't exist at that time as this concept, but problems of inequality have existed for a long time. So what have you done about them? Thank you very much, and I will come back in the question and answer session. And now let's see if Professor Paulina has been able to connect. It seems we still have problems. If you can please play the video she sent.
I am Yungargu, the singing rainbow serpent, traveling high up in the sky and down through the rivers, the air and the sea, the river and the soil. I feel a great sadness now, carried by many people. They cry out and ask, what is happening in our nation, in our country, in our home? I see below me floods and fires crisscrossing the land, big storms and harsh heat. Our knowledge of country ignored by government and bureaucracy. Wake up, I say to you, and hear my belly crawl. Wake up maybe one last time and listen to Bruce Pascoe's call. There's wisdom here, heavily rooted intrinsically between Aboriginal nations. Their land, living waters, sea and sky. Aboriginal voices being muted in their protection of our rivers, crying out, we need to be recognized. Defrauded, diseased into staying quiet. Now through their mourning awakening others to their calling. Recognized, reconciled and healing. A united transformation in order to fully nurture the Australian nation. This Australia, taken by theft from a lineage of ancestral custodians. It's time to pause and take a deeper breath. Rivers must have a right to life, and their contribution to all other life must be protected. Some are fearful that the humans lead their own extinction. I have hope in human beings, for living water lives within them too. It's their life they must save if they are to continue living on Mother Earth. Mother Earth covered in living waters, cradled beneath the sky. I keep on singing as I believe a coalition of hope is coming. The Mudawara Fitzroy River Council is calling a circle of elders, wise people from across the nation to come to our river country, share the stories of development, protection, and new economies, culture, conservation, science, tourism, renewable energy. This can be a future. Let the policy reflect these Northern Development Indigenous dreams and plans for growth. Investing in sustainable and fair trade through Indigenous hands. Traditional owners are standing up, supporting economic growth and prosperity. Heaven knows how hard it has been. Enslaved, poisoned, imprisoned, and dispossessed, stripped of their land since George Grey's 1837 expedition first mapped these western frontier estates. Surely now, don't come to them with an unsustainable Fitzroy River management plan. Stand together in good faith, free informed consent. Stand with the Mudawara Fitzroy River Council for a fair go. A circle of elders could hear these stories and frame new ways to build the forever industries. Industries grounded in climate science, human rights, and environmental justice. Cooperation, not conflict. Unity, not divide and conquer. Collaboration, not manipulation. Cultural synthesis, not cultural invasion, done hand in hand with fellow Australians. Reaching out to global networks to achieve the Paris targets and transition from fossil fuels to renewables. Valuing the sunk cost investment of this globally unique Fitzroy River, a riverine system not found anywhere else on the planet. Stop the invasion, the continuing colonization. Let's recognize the original West Australians, their right to freedom and justice upon their tribal estates. Recognize them for their collective wisdom, science, farming, engineering, medicine and healing, diverse trade, innovation and ceremonies. Indigenous nations believe they have a fiduciary duty as custodians and guardians. Legislative river protection acts across the whole country. This must be done before it's too late. Earth jurisprudence, first law, law of the land. This is the cry from the Aboriginal nations of this wide brown land. This has been the message championed through the rivers of the MDB. Rivers have the right to life. They must flow free. This must become a nation's songline if the Australian bloodlines are to hold the past, present, and future strong. I sing this to you, singing the River Law song for people and country.
Thank you very much to Professor Polina for having sent this video. And if we can see if she can connect with us to the meeting. It would be very valuable to have her views, as well as a pleasure to have her. But it seems, unfortunately, we continue having problems. But this video, this short video, shows what was mentioned before, which is unsustainable management of water resources. And it called my attention, the Declaration of Indigenous People. This is for people who know they have rights in many parts of the world. And this is not even known so much the poverty is. So now is the challenge to bring the different peoples of different countries, of different socioeconomic strata, the indigenous people in Australia. And if in Australia we have problems of these dimensions, we have them much more in countries like myself, like mine in Mexico, as well as all those places where we have indigenous population, but not only indigenous populations, but every sector of population, that they have the right of having access to clean water. And this is not related to the price, so we won't include these arguments in these discussions, but the right to have access to them. So I would like to go, well, thank again Professor Polina. I'm sorry she couldn't join us. I would like to go back to Quentin and to Asit Biswas, but to Quentin with my question of what do we do? As you have explained, not only here, but you have been part of many global initiatives and local initiatives, one of them, the water justice now in Australia, that is so important. And what do we do with reality? That's not the proper question. What do we do with the policies? How do we match them with reality? How do we ground these big initiatives? If you can talk to us about this new commission and what progress can it help us to make? Because the commission is a group of people that can trigger some change, the change we're talking about.
Look, thank you so much for the question, Cecilia, and I want to pay my respects as well to the short film that Anne Polina provided to us on behalf of her communities and the Matawara Fitzroy River Council. Look, in terms of response, we have to walk the talk. I'm sure you've been to more workshops and conferences than I have, Cecilia. I know Asit has, and you often hear the talk, but it's rare to hear or see the walk. And certainly the Global Commission on the Economics of Water is intended, and we'll have to judge that in the years to come, the months and years to come, is intended to bring about that change, to support that change. But of course, 17 commissioners, no matter how capable they may be, and we have very influential co-chairs, Director General of the WTO, Ngozi Okonjo-Iweala, a senior minister from Singapore, Tharman Shanmugaratnam, and two leading academics, Johan Rockström at the Potsdam Institute, director of the Potsdam Institute, and Mariana Mazzucato, who's at University College London. So three very, very impressive co-chairs and commissioners, mayors, two mayors from different parts of the world, from Freetown, from New Orleans, etc., and people from various countries. So so great people, but they can't change the world. The world can only change itself. And so what we are intending to do is, that's the idea anyway, is that it's almost the third leg of a three-legged stool. So the first leg was the 2007-2008 report by Nicholas Stern, that came out of Her Majesty's Treasury in the United Kingdom. The second report was by Siddhartha Dasgupta on biodiversity, came out recently. And then this is supposed to be the third leg, so to speak, in the context of the economics of water. And all of us agree that transformative change is required. We have a plan in terms of what we intend to do over the next year and a half or more. And we are funded and we are independent. We're funded by the Dutch government, but we are completely independent of the decisions that we're making are entirely our own. So we get the credit and the critiques that will come from it. So there's a report that will be released at UN Water Conference 2023, and that report will be of some dimension of 25,000 words or so. The co-chairs may have their own particular take messages that they'll want to highlight. But that's really just the beginning. That's putting together a range of evidence and that we are aware of, and making very clear, and you made this point, Cecilia, and Asit, of course, did it in his presentation, it's making it as concrete as possible with good examples as well as poor examples, as in things that didn't work. And then the next step from that, from the Global Commission's perspective, is to engage with a whole range of, the term is stakeholders, but I would hopefully call them partners, in the sense of people who want to engage with what we've written. To disagree with us is certainly absolutely what they should do if they disagree. Give us alternative evidence, come up with alternative ways of thinking about it. Diversity is important here, so we'll have probably 4 or 5, what are we calling, societal dialogues. And they will bring together those ideas. And of course, people, experts like yourself, of course, and people joining us tonight will be able to have an opportunity to respond and give us their own views and evidence. So that's a process that will follow after UN Water Conference 2023, which is in March and takes place in New York City. So I don't know where it goes, but it really is about actions. If you look at the Lord Stern's report, on climate change, about half the chapters there are on actions. Big report, jointly written with others, of course, from Her Majesty's Treasury, but a lot of focus on actions, and that's certainly the way that I think we want to take this. Where it goes, I don't know. We'll do the very level best to make some change, but no, it's not 17 people who can make that change. It's the world that will make the change, and it's the communities, the people we can connect to, the dialogues, I think will be incredibly important. We're going well beyond UN Water 2023, and I'm looking forward to Asit's comments in Mar del Plata, because of course he wrote the summarized it, and to see where we've gone since 1977. That's So I hopefully that answers the question, and hopefully we can do our job and do it well on behalf of the world in the context of the water space and the economics of water.
Thank you, Quentin. You mentioned, you elaborated on this very well, as you always do, and you made very important points. It's time for change, but this commission may come at at the perfect time, because there is so much awareness in the world because of climate change, but there is awareness on environment, and water falls into environment. So this may attract more attention of more people. And if we can please keep Professor Quentin Grafton in the screen, and also bring Professor Biswas, and that way it will be 3 of us.
Of course.
Thank you. And also, just following to Quentin's comments that were very rich. You were in Mar del Plata. You have been part of this process. And so where do you see, not where do you see the world now, but how do you see that progress? What else can we make that has not been made before? Or what difference can we make?
My thinking is, with the present knowledge, present resources available, there is no reason why everyone in the world cannot have clean water that can be drunk. We don't need the funds. Countries have enough funds. Some countries may need some help in terms of capacity building, etc. But I go back, if Phnom Penh, a war-torn country, when PPWSA of 1993 started, it had 3 engineers, meter readers who were basically illiterate. They didn't know how to read, but they were meter readers, which of course gave a good scope for corruption. But how, even under such conditions, Action Chan managed to change this mindset where people are paying for water they're using, poor are subsidized, rich are paying, and only public utility which does not get any subsidy from the government. It doesn't get, PPWSA doesn't get a cent from the municipality or a cent from the Cambodian government. They manage their own water, and what people pay from there, they do the investment, and they are showing that this can be done. So the question I've been asking to my colleagues in, for example, Indian, if Phnom Penh can do it, why can't Delhi? And the main problem is, I find out the main problem is several. One problem is nothing to do with knowledge, nothing to do with lack of money. One is a political involvement in the wrong way. Many of the Indian politicians want water as a vote-getting issue. They think if you make water free, people will vote for the party. And that becomes a major issue, and they interfere. I had many discussions with the heads, chief executives of the India's top water agencies, and they are basically saying that main difficulty is, first, they're not there for a long time. As I said, average stay is 18 months. If India makes one simple change, and which seems to be institutionally difficult to do because of vested interest and inertia, one simple change, that is, headhunt the best person available to run the water utility. Give that person 3 years initially with clear performance KPI. They should add these KPIs. And that person's performance is just every year properly. And the end of 3rd year, if their performance is good, give that person another 3 years. So at least 6 years. I think 60 to 70% India's, Delhi's or Mumbai's water problem will be solved by that one simple institutional step. But it will be very difficult to do it. I talked with the previous Prime Minister, Mr. Manmohan Singh, and he said, like you, I'm a lost academician who lost his way and got into politics. But I cannot do that. They cannot change the system which is ingrained in all over India in this 18 months, average 18 months. And big cities like Bangalore, the Silicon Valley of India, it's actually 12 months. And it's impossible to get a person who does not know anything about water, stays about 12 months, and you expect it to be, the water utility to be changed. So I think the water profession many times is barking at the wrong tree. We talk about funding, we talk of new technology, but believe me, all the technology, most of the technology is available, or they're available off the shelf. The expertise is most countries available, but they are not allowed to work in the system. And this institutional structure, which the water professional has not given enough thought. And how do you get the politicians out of water? And this is the problem. Let me give you 2 anecdotal stories of 2 chief ministers. I won't mention name, 2 chief ministers. When I received the 2006 Stockholm Water Prize, one chief minister approached me. He said, "Oh, you have been honored with such a prestigious prize. Can you help me?" I said, "Of course, I'd be delighted to help." And I told him, "You don't have to pay a fees or anything. My time is at your disposal. All you cover is my travel expenses and stay. Rest is free." And the chief minister said, "I would like to provide everyone in my city, which is a mega city, clean water. Is that possible? I said, absolutely no problem. He says, this is new because nobody says it is possible. But I told the person that we will provide 24/7 water, clean water to everybody. Okay, that is possible. Then I also asked, I don't have enough money. Where will you get the money? My answer was, you're spending a tremendous amount of money unwisely. No money is necessary, but we will redeploy the existing resources then. And the third question is, I also asked was, and the person was very happy and said, third question I also asked was, one more thing, nobody should pay for water. And I said, I'm sorry, it cannot be done. And that is the problem. And about 6 years ago, another chief minister approached me when I was in NUS in Singapore. And he said, it's very urgent, the state is suffering. Can you come tomorrow? Because we want some solutions. And I said, I cannot come tomorrow, but I'll see when I can come, and I'll come back to you. And I said, I'll let you know when I can come. So next day I sent him an email saying I can come about 20 days after that date. For 1 week, there was no answer. After second week, I called the chief minister, personal assistant. I said, the chief minister was in a hurry. I'm not getting an answer. I have to make my plans. I can't leave everything open. All I need to know, yes or no, so that do you want me there or not? And with a sheepish smile, he said, sir, it's been raining heavily and the water problem seems to have disappeared, and the water has disappeared from chief minister's agenda. And those are the problems. How do we convince that water problem cannot be changed from one day to another? We need long-term commitment. As Lee Kuan Yew put 3 people in his prime minister's office to look at all other policies through the lens of water. If it did not pass, that they are not out. So how do we get the politicians, and this is the main problem, how do you get the politicians to get out of water and leave the technocrats, and they can give the idea saying, these are the general guidelines we need to follow. We want 24/7 clean water, everybody gets water. Then let the technocrats and the administrators get on with the job rather than them interfering. How do you do that? And that is the main problem. We are not, in my view, we are not addressing in the water profession at all. We are talking of new technology. For heaven's sake, we have almost all the technology we need that we can apply already. It will improve, of course, but that is not an excuse. And if Phnom can do it in 8 or 10 years, I don't see why other countries much richer than them, much richer than Cambodia, much less corrupt than Cambodia, more technology available than Cambodia. And believe me, they put Thames Water, the largest water privatized company in water, to shame in terms of performance indicators. So this is my point. We can do it, but not in the way we're proceeding at present. I'd be interested to hear Quentin's view on this, because his commission is going to look into that as well.
Yes, thank you. Thank you for the mentioning the political aspect, because that is very important. If we don't bring the politicians with us, or they don't stay out, we won't be able to make progress. But let me bring at this point our other very distinguished member of the panel, who is Professor Graham Roy. He is Dean of External Engagement in the College of Social Sciences and Professor of Economics at the University of Glasgow. He is a former senior civil servant in the Scottish Government and head of the First Minister's Policy Unit. He is a past director of the Fraser O'Fallander Institute at the University of Strathclyde. He has been a special advisor to the Scottish Parliament's Economic Committee and is incoming chair of the Scottish Fiscal Commission. Graham, thank you very much for joining us. And not only to close, but thank you very much for sharing your thoughts with us. You have all this experience as a practitioner, right, in the policy at the political level. And so how do we bring these aspects that Asit has just mentioned, which is the policy part, the political aspect?
Mm-hmm. So there's a firstly, Cecilia, thank you very much for inviting me to come along and join in the discussion so far. It's been absolutely fascinating. I mean, on the kind of politics and the policy part of it, and Asit makes a really good point, that I think one of the challenges that is faced, I think, when you try and get what we know we need to do into practice is actually the real politics of it and the political economy of it. And how do you get policymakers and politicians to be able to think about the long term when you're facing particular short-term pressures or you're facing potential re-election? And actually, systems potentially discourage you from thinking about, you know, the long-term solutions and the long-term benefits that might come down the line. So, for example, in the UK, we have a thing called the Green Book formula, which is how we're meant to evaluate and appraise public infrastructure projects or major public programs. And what that encourages you to do is to discount things that happen in the future. Now, there's sound economic reasons why you might want to do that, because of various technical reasons, and we're impatient as humans. We're impatient for things. We want things now. But one of the challenges with that is that payoffs that happen in the very long term are valued less than the costs that happen today, because you're discounting things that are coming into the future. So how you can actually get the political system and the policymaking system to actually value the structural preventative changes that we need to do now in order to generate long-term benefits is something which is really quite difficult to do, particularly if you try and put it through a traditional economics lens. So we know we need to do all of this stuff, but actually, how do you actually incentivize the changes that take place now? And that requires leadership. It requires coalitions of the willing to actually come together to make the decisions that need to happen, to accept that there might be some short-term investments that are needed versus long-term gains. But it's also thinking about how you actually structure things like financial markets, procurement markets, and government bond systems in order so that you're able to make the big decisions that you need now for potential payoffs that are much further down the line. And sadly, in many countries, and don't discount the UK from that context, short-termism in politics dominate quite a lot of this, and that's why the more we can think about not just the policies we need to do, but how we understand the processes for doing that, I think you get much better chance of having success and change. So it's not to discount the politics from this, because it's always something that's going to be really quite challenging to do.
Thank you, Graham. There is a question I would like to take and bring back to what you just mentioned, an open discussion for three of you. There is a question from a viewer from Sindh, Pakistan. He or she is saying, we are facing flooding under reparation, opening mouths of waterways. There is no information. We have no structures and legislations on this side. So one can claim, and it would be true, that it rained much more than it normally rains. It was a stronger monsoon. But Graham just said, which is the policies, the looking not for the immediate response, but looking a little bit more towards the future, what Asit mentioned about integrating the political dimension, because we cannot get rid of them. And Quentin, in this new commission, how do we bring the decision makers for events like this? Yes, there will be, according to climate change estimates, more droughts, more intense droughts, or more floods. But we have to prepare the cities, the countries for these changes. And this is where policies come, what Graham just said. So if each one of you could please make comments. Let's start with Quentin. The example of the floods in Pakistan is only one, but we are seeing these events all over the world. Developed countries are responding better than developing countries, but perhaps not good enough. So
well, I think there's multiple things required. I won't speak to what's happening in the Sindh right now because I don't have that expertise. I think Asit has that. But look, if you want to make a comparison between Pakistan and Bangladesh, I don't want to offend anyone, but Bangladesh has also had its series of floods, but they're not to the same extent in terms of the consequential impacts. And that's, I think, a function of empowering communities. And so that's part of the approach. And I think broadly speaking, in climate change, the issue around adaptation is really about empowering people, empowering communities. Now, how do you empower them? Well, you allow them to do certain things that's good for them and support them, and capacity support from various sources, regional, federal type of governments. But also there's a range of things that can be done with the public-private sector. Going beyond that is this issue really, and I think this is a critical point. And it sounds strange to say this, but never let a crisis go to waste. And that basically says is that in times of crisis, you can start to make change. And Asit gave a very good example of a chief minister in India. There was a time of crisis of a drought. So that chief minister was presumably able to think about making changes and actions. As soon as the rains fell, then no longer crisis, move on. And I think that's the point. And I think people are seeing, people who are prepared to look and see. 2022, in my view, is a breakpoint year. Okay, it is a breakpoint year. So the expectations in the climate change modeling was that we would be getting these impacts in the 2030s and beyond, into the future. We're now getting them now, and water is the driver and a consequence of that. And we are going to see a whole range of catastrophic change. And I just don't want to be alarmist, but approximately 1.5–2 billion people on this planet are alive today because of food trade. And that food trade primarily happens because of water. Okay? And so as we get more and more of these extreme events, whether it be drought, whether it be flooding, sea level rise, which affects wetlands, et cetera, then we're going to get more of these crisis points, and they are going to be systemized across the planet. So, India has been a food exporter. India will no longer be a food exporter. You will have food surplus countries that will export less food. Then you have large population increases in Africa. So this is the food, water, energy space. Water is front and center in that. And so those are the crises that are coming. The crises are already here. We've had them for decades. They're just going to get much worse. So we have to act. We have to change. The political economy is another way of saying it, but it means that those people who currently have the water, have the power, have the influence, they're going to have to, that system has to change. And we've seen it in the fossil fuel lobbies. There's well documented in the literature how they got in the way to create uncertainty, to stop action. The same sort of thing has happened in the water space and is happening in the water space. We have to be realistic and understand that, and we have to have other ways of acting on it. So that's just a brief summary of the sorts of things that are required. But I don't want to sound despondent, because I'm not. I'm hopeful, because there are examples, concrete examples of actions that have worked, that are working. Of course, they must be context specific and bespoke, but we need those, and we can use them. But we will also need that leadership at a community level and all the way up to the top to make sure that we get the outcomes we want. And let's hope we're on that path, because if we're not, I can tell you right now, the world is going to be in a seriously, seriously bad way.
It's true. Thank you, Quentin. So, Asit and then Graham, could you please comment on this, the aspects on these changes in the world now because of climate change, but exacerbated for policies or lack of them, as well as lack of the implementation, and the politics of it? Asit and then Graham, please.
Best answer I can give is, about a few years ago, I had a discussion with the President of the European Union. And he looked at me and he said, the main problem, he was talking about the EU politicians. He said, we know what is to do. That's not an issue. We know what's to be done. But what we haven't the idea, or what we really do not know, how to do them and still get elected. And that is the fundamental issue. in the democracy. How do you get elected? In the US, for example, with the 2-year election cycle, how do you make a long-term plan? That's an important issue. And I don't have an answer to that, because I have worked with the politicians. They all want to be elected, and that subsumes anything else. And how do we look for a greater part of this, greater benefit to the society? So I don't have a solution to that in how to do that. But to the gentleman from Pakistan or the lady from Pakistan, the question you asked is very good and very important. My answer is very simple. Pakistan, of course, we cannot predict when the heavy rains will come because of climate change. But between flood and heavy rain, there is a time lag. And the information system in Pakistan, I'm sad to say, is extremely poor even compared to Bangladesh and India. In Bangladesh and India, recently, the last few years, they have changed their information systems so quickly. So once they see heavy rain somewhere or a heavy cyclone coming, they put into practice some of the policies that have moved the people. They have 24 to 48 hours advance notice, as a result of which people are moved from the most likely affected area to safer area, reduces the number of deaths. And so this adaptive part in Pakistan, my dear friend from Pakistan, has been missing. And unless you start looking for, we don't know, we can't predict when the floods will come, but we can predict it will come at some stage. So be prepared, have a good information system and an effective information system, then it will reduce the damages very, very significantly. And from water supply and sanitation viewpoint, last I saw recently, 1,400 people died from floods in Pakistan. From my past experience, I think several times that number will die after the flood because of poor water and sanitation related problem. So that is one of the biggest problems. It's not the people who make the headlines from the initial death, much though my heart goes out to them, but the number of people several times who will die who nobody will care about or even know about. So those are some of the things that could be done beforehand. If the flood comes, where will the people get water in the higher level? How do we move them? Their sanitation. So we have to be prepared, adapt to what is coming in the next few years. But I don't see some countries are making some progress, other countries are not. And Pakistan, I'm sad to say, all we can say, one of the problems with the climate change has been, anytime there's a problem, the politician says, all due to climate change, and I can't do anything about it. It's not my problem. It's beyond that. Yes, my answer to that is you can prepare for it, adapt to it. And that is what they're missing now in Pakistan and many other parts of the world.
Thank you, Asit. And then we come to Graham. Graham, with these changes that climate change is bringing, how do we make policy part of them?
So a few things I would say. I think that one of the things, if you break it down into bite-sized chunks, there's issues around understanding what needs to be done. Then there's issues around understanding what the solutions are, and then there's the issues about how you actually do it. And I think that we've made great strides over the last 2 decades. In the first 2 ones, we now understand climate change, what contributes to climate change, what are the challenges of that, much better than we've ever done in the past. And there's much more consensus in sensible discussions about that. We actually have a fair good idea about the solutions. We know what we need to do. We know the technical changes we need to do. We know the changes we need to make on all aspects, whether it be water, energy, our way of life. So we've got the solutions. The bit that's left is the how, and that's not in any way to make that as though that's difficult, but actually focusing all our attention on the how. How do we actually build the coalitions to make the change? How do we think that we need to have the institutional reform that make it easier for politicians to take on the leadership and to make the long-term decisions that are needed for better policy. And a lot of that is about how we can improve information across the general public about understanding the risks here. If we think that politicians, this is not a fair characterization, but if we think that politicians' main motivation for being in office is to be re-elected, they're actually making people aware of the implications of inaction and the potential long-term benefits of change, actually then potentially strengthens their electoral chances if they make the changes that are needed to be just now, or they won't be as punished because people understand what it is that they're doing. And I think that part of it is really important. We've seen successes of that in countries. I think the Committee on Climate Change in the UK is a really good example of a new institution that is helping to inform the debate and make changes. And I think a lot of the discussions that we sometimes have around climate change or around water just very much focus on the issue, and that's entirely right. But then thinking about how you actually implement the change you need to into the real world of politics, as Quentin said, the political economy and the practicalities of delivery, I think that's the bit where we know what needs to be done, we know what the solutions are, we need to really focus on the how, and it's getting that how bit right, which I think is absolutely crucial.
Thank you very much. It's true, it's broader aspects, not only the 17 persons of the commission or the number of persons who have been in previous commissions, it's population, it's preparedness, use of technology like the information system, and like Graham says, it's answering the correct questions, the right questions to which one should be prepared to respond and then to act accordingly. So from our side, I'm going to finish, to leave the floor to Graham for him to close. I would like to thank all of you to be here with us. To the participants, there were questions we couldn't answer, and I'm sorry for that, like the one on water conservation as well as some others. We will hope to be able to talk with you in the next occasion and continue the conversation on water. So Graham, the floor to you, and thank you again for joining.
Great, thank you very much, Cecilia, and thank you to Quentin and Asit there for that discussion. I really enjoyed that. And on behalf of the University of Glasgow and the School of Interdisciplinary Studies, can I thank all the speakers and participants for their engagement and fascinating insights today. I think everybody on the webinar will agree with me that we've all learned a lot from what we've heard, and it's great to see so many colleagues join us from different parts of the world. And I think issues of water justice and links between water and poverty are important issues for us all in whatever country that we're in. And I think we've had that fantastic, excellent contributions from all of the speakers, both in terms of the challenges, but also in terms of the solutions, the changes that we need to make in order to make a difference. And I think the video from Anne was hugely powerful in that context. The recording for the webinar will be available on our YouTube channels shortly after, and we'll share a link on the social media. This is part of a series of webinars on water and sustainable development that the University of Glasgow's School of Interdisciplinary Studies are running. We'll be in touch with details of the next webinar in the coming weeks. More broadly, if you're interested in finding out more about what our school's environmental science and sustainability research group do, you can find details on the school's research page at glasgow.ac.uk/schools/interdisciplinary. And then can I just finally thank the team here at the University of Glasgow, including Craig, Nico and Amy McCready, for all their work that's gone into organising today's event behind the scenes. Take care, everyone, and we look forward to seeing you all very soon. Bye for now.